Hi everyone, welcome to my session on becoming an impactful QA engineer. I am Julia Pottinger. I am from the beautiful island of Jamaica, where we have amazing beaches, beautiful people, and wonderful food. I'm currently the training and development manager at QualityWorks, and you can find me on Twitter over at iluge876. I am on YouTube at youtube.com/Julia Pottinger, where I share about test automation and a bit of development with React. If you're interested in those topics, you can check that out. I also blog about those topics as well on juliapottinger.com. And I have a course on WebDriver.io, which is a test automation framework on Test Automation University. So today we're going to talk about what you will need to become a QA engineer. I'm going to first walk you through my story of how I became an impactful QA engineer, and then I'll give you the things that you will need to become one or improve on what you already have. So let's first start by defining what is a QA engineer. So a QA engineer is someone that is involved in the planning, implementation, and maintenance of quality. That is satisfying business and customer needs. So it's not just being a gatekeeper for bugs or finding bugs. It's someone that is involved from the very beginning, from you have requirements, from you have design, you are checking the functionality, the performance, the usability, the accessibility of the application, and you're ensuring that it meets a certain standard. You're ensuring that business needs are met. You're ensuring that customers are satisfied. So how do you become an impactful QA engineer, or who is a QA engineer? So once it is that you're able to satisfy business need and customer needs using your toolkit, and for me, a toolkit is a list of skills that you have that you develop over time. So you develop those toolkits, you know how to test properly, you know how to communicate properly with other shareholders like developers, product owners. You're able to, sorry, you're able to properly advocate for certain features to be added into the project, and you're able to champion quality. Now, once it is that you become an impactful QA, you're able to push for certain non-functional testing like performance testing, usability testing. You're able to do exploratory testing, etc. So you build on top of your skill sets, because when you first start out, you may not have all of these skills, but over time you will build on those skills and become more impactful. So what skills would you need to become an impactful QA engineer? There are a wide variety of skills that you'll need, and I have grouped them into 4 categories. They're non-exhaustive because every QA engineer is unique and different, but these are some skills that I think most QA engineers do have, and they make an impact in the product lifecycle. The first one is understanding Agile and QA processes. Now, I included Agile because a lot of companies are moving away from waterfall and they're doing the Agile process. In Agile, you have to do you have to do story sizing, you have to do retro. And in story sizing, your role as a QA here is to advocate for testing to be pointed as well. So when you're pointing, it's not just the developer effort, it's also the testing effort, how long it's going to take to write unit tests, how long it's going to take to write test automation, how long it's going to take for you to write test cases or user scenarios. That should also be included in the pointing, how in the story sizing. And in retro or when you are creating acceptance criteria, you should also be advocating for quality. So if there are different functionalities, how will it affect the user? How will it affect different types of users? And then for release management, you have to be able to balance the quality of the product that is going out with the timeline. Most times there are 2-week sprints and you may be pressured to send out a product, but you haven't tested it properly. Being able to stand firm and say, I cannot recommend that this product go out right now because we have only tested 50% of it, and there is still a lot of unknowns and potential bugs that may be there. And discussing this with your product owner and your Scrum Master, and then giving a recommendation for if the features should be released or if you should cut down on the number of features that are going into the sprint, etc. And in order to do all of this, you need to be able to communicate effectively. So effective communication is very important. The way you communicate blockers to your team, the way you communicate how many stories you're able to take on in a sprint, the way you communicate bugs. If you find a bug, how do you write up a proper bug report? How do you communicate with the developer that is going to be fixing the bug or the developer that had worked on the feature? And having knowledge of different software principles, how to do exploratory testing, how to write test cases, how to write bug reports, how to properly write an acceptance criteria, and asking important questions about features. Is this the intended purpose of the feature? Are there things that we are missing? And giving your suggestions to those. No, there are other testing concepts that I mentioned. So like 7 testing principles that has to do with testing is context dependent. So if you're going to be testing a NASA spaceship versus testing an e-commerce website, there are going to be different user scenarios. If you're testing a medical software, then there may be more risk as you're dealing with human life versus if you're testing for an ebook download page. So there are different types of testing that you have to consider, and each app, each software, everything that you're testing is different, and you have to consider that difference in the user scenarios that you're going to get. So by doing exploratory testing, where you go in, you time box yourself, and you try to find flaws with the application, you try to understand how the application works, and you report those. And then, very importantly, understanding what to automate. So there is something called shift left testing, which is where you have testing introduced into the software development lifecycle as early as possible. So if you're doing shift left testing, you're going to want to have some test automation in there. You're going to want to automate your regression test, and your regression test is those table features that is going out in each release, and sometimes they aren't changed, but you have to test if new code has adversely affected them. And this is something that you do over and over for each sprint, and it can become repetitive and it can become a lot. So if you automate those things, then it's going to help you save time by not focusing on those features that are stable that you still have to test, but on new features that are coming out, and it will give you more time to do manual testing on those, especially if you're shifting left, especially if you have continuous integration pipeline, then understanding what to automate, the type of scenarios that you should automate is going to be very important. And then with understanding what to automate, you have to know how to do test automation if you're going to be implementing it. So first, you're going to need to know how to write some object-oriented programming language, so Java, JavaScript, Python, etc. Once you understand those clean coding practices, then you're going to need to understand how to find locators if you're doing UI testing. Or if you're doing database testing, you may need to know how to do some database queries. If you're doing API testing, then you're going to need to know how to call the APIs. Maybe it has an API key, so you're going to need to know how to read documentation, understand the documentation that is given to you, and test the APIs. For locator strategies in UI testing, you're going to need to know how to find locators using CSS or using XPath. And then creating and executing an effective test automation strategy that your entire team understands. They're able to follow what they're going to be automating, what tools they're going to be using to do the automation, what levels are they automating at? Are they automating at the UI level, the service level? Are they only doing unit tests? And if you have continuous integration that is with tools like Jenkins, GitHub Actions, GitLab, then you're going to need to learn how to set up those continuous integration pipelines as well. Now, there are a variety of other skills that an impactful QA engineer will have. such as clean code practices. In test automation, we use page objects, that is separating certain functionality and locators from the test itself. You have performance testing that you could do, you have business logic, so understanding the business logic of the application that you're testing is very important, as sometimes if you don't understand that, then you may miss bugs, or things that are bugs you may think to be features, or vice versa. And as I said before, if you're going to be doing some form of database automation or database testing, then you need to know how to write SQL. And doing mobile automation, mobile is very broad in terms of it has a lot of different screen sizes, operating system, devices. So automating those and having it to run is going to take a lot less time than if you were trying to test on 10 different devices, 5 phones, 10 tablets, etc. Now, I have been doing testing for 6 years, and in those 6 years, I have gathered a lot of skills. So in addition to the skills that are there, I am able to write test automation in Nightwatch, in Java, a bit of Ruby, but I mostly use JavaScript, and I write my test automation using WebDriver.io. I know some SQL. I have used Git before. I am ISTQB certified. I champion quality on the different projects that I go on. I know how to do object-oriented programming. But I honestly didn't start here. I didn't start with all this knowledge. I didn't start knowing all of these things. My very first automated test using JavaScript went very horrible because I left university. Well, I was in my 3rd year of university and I started an internship. I was doing a bachelor's in computer science. I had learned object-oriented programming, but I was mostly using Java. Like Java was my first love in programming, and I really enjoyed writing code in Java. So when I went and I was doing the internship, I had to start learning about testing, and I didn't know much about testing at all because in school, they would just mostly teach you about developer things. So you're going to create an app, you're going to be creating software. So much of my projects at school was about software creation. It really wasn't about software testing. But the internship was for testing. And so I had to learn about this new world of testing and what it all entailed. And in learning that, I had to start doing test automation. I was like, what is test automation? It's really creating a script for the computer to mimic certain actions, enter text, click on a button, verify that you're on a screen, verify that certain text came up, etc. So things that I was doing regularly, creating a script to execute that. Now, I first wrote some code in Java, and that was okay, and that was well. But I was told that I was going on a project and we would be doing JavaScript. No, I didn't know JavaScript at all, but I was like, okay, cool. It's an object-oriented programming. I have the foundation of OOP, so therefore I am able to, go on and maybe wing it and try to do a thing. So this was my very first test. This was using a framework, a test automation framework called Nightwatch, and I am testing a search feature. So in the search feature, I am clicking on the input field. I am waiting for it to be visible. I am asserting that it's visible, and then I'm inputting the terminator. It was a movie search field, so I was searching for movies. I entered the terminator, and then I paused. I did an explicit wait, which in test automation, you really shouldn't do explicit waits, but I was pretty new to it. I didn't know. And then I had a for loop, and I was asserting that all the things that came back contained the movie title Terminator. And so this for me was pretty bad. It didn't have any page objects, and page objects would be something where locators like these aren't in my test. They would be in a file separated, and functionality like looping through and checking for the text would be in that page object as well. But I didn't have any page objects. My locators were really horrible. As you can see here, it's really long locators. So every time they would do a release, my code would break because they would either add a div, they would move the nth child position, something would just change and my code would just break all the time. And it was very frustrating. And I didn't know JavaScript. I was on I then moved to a project with someone. And at the time, ES5, ES6 had just came out, and you were learning about the new for loops. I was still writing the regular for loops, and they were just writing the one with the question mark and everything. And it was a lot for me because they knew a lot of JavaScript and I didn't. So I found myself struggling when we were doing pull requests. They would have a lot of comments on my pull request about how this could have just been one line and this could have been changed, etc. So I felt really overwhelmed. So I had to roll it all the way back. Yes, I knew how to code, but I honestly didn't know JavaScript. So I had to go and I had to learn JavaScript. Now, when I was learning JavaScript, I remember this song, and the song was very catchy for me, and I liked it. And it encouraged me and got me motivated and pumped to learn. So it's the Node.js song. I don't know if you know the song, but we're going to listen to it and you can tell me if it gets you hype, if it gets you in the mood to learn about JavaScript.
Your online application starting to fail. It's crawling on the network just as fast as a snail. We need invented programming starting from the top. Better write some code so the world doesn't stop. With a non-blocking model, we will be just fine. Built on Google Chrome's V8 runtime. And all you need to do is write some JavaScript code and use the real-time web with Node.
Yeah, so that was the song. And I was learning about Node.js and how to write JavaScript properly. And over time, I became pretty good at it to where now I can talk about JavaScript. I've written courses using JavaScript. So I did improve over time, but I had to start all the way from scratch to relearning a programming language. And there's no shame in that. If it is that you don't know something while you're working, it's okay to take some time and learn. Now, how do you go about building your QA engineer skills? This is what I did, and this is what I'm going to recommend to you. So, the first thing is that you need to create a list of objectives. I'm going to be sharing some skills that I think you should have, but you know yourself, you know your job description, you know maybe a job that you're trying to get. Write down the list of objectives that you want to learn. Is it that you want to learn JavaScript? Is it that you want to learn a particular test automation framework? You maybe want to learn some testing concept, or you maybe want to learn something else. Whatever it is, write down what you want to learn and set realistic expectations. It didn't take me 2 months or a year to gain all the skill that I had. It's something that I have been working on for 6 years. And you may be saying 6 years, that's a really long time. I'm not saying that it will take that long, but in order to continue grow, it's a continuous learning process. And by learning and sharing with people, you're going to realize that there may be some things that you haven't considered and you may want to just add that. So every month I learn something just by interacting, going to different conferences, hearing how people approach problems, I learned something. But you have to set a realistic expectation that based on the list of things that you want to learn, it won't take an hour, it won't take a day. And then you have to dedicate time to learn. We upskill ourselves. There are also different training initiatives for persons that want to get a certification, attend conferences, etc. So within your company that you work, see if there are any training initiatives that they have to give you some time to learning on the job, because work is 8 hours out of the day. If you can get some of that time to learn, it's really going to help you. Because I was trying to go home and study and learn, but I was tired at the end of the day. So asking my manager for time to learn, because it's going to help and impact the company when I have better skills. And I was given some time. So see how you can find time at work to upskill yourself. And you can use some time outside of that as well. And then use resources and mentors. There are a lot of different mentors, there are a lot of different persons that are sharing their knowledge in the space. You can find some and use that. And then creating different projects. So creating a project in a different test automation framework, maybe using some API automation, mobile automation, etc. And by working on multiple different projects, you're going to start to build your skills. Now, I'm going to give you a 12-step roadmap that you can use to learn some skills. The first one, as I mentioned, is understanding testing concepts. So how to properly write bugs, how to properly create user scenarios, how to do agile testing. There is a book called Agile Condensed by Janet Gregory and Lisa Crispin. They also have 2 other books on agile and agile in the workplace that you can check out. They're really good. You can learn how to do exploratory testing and how to verify and validate requirements. Then you need to find your community. Your community is going to help you to learn and to share. Some communities that I have learned in and I have shared in is Test Guild. Test Guild is run by Joe Calinto, and it's a really good weekly newsletter. They also have conferences and podcasts that you can check out. Ministry of Testing is another big one. They are going to have Test Bash in a week or so, and it's going to be a 24-hour conference that you can check out. Test Automation University is a place, and it's free for all your test automation needs. If you want to learn JavaScript, Python, Java, you can check it out, and it's there. And at the end, I'm going to share some links to all of these things. Then select a programming language that you want to learn. If it is that you don't know any programming language, maybe you knew all the testing concepts, but you're a manual tester and you want to start moving into test automation, you first need to know a programming language. That's going to set the base for you. So object-oriented programming, learn that. And then once you have done that, you can check out things like Free Code Camp to learn Test Automation University. And I use Free Code Camp a lot, even sometimes just to refresh my JavaScript knowledge. They have a lot of different programming language courses that you can check out. And Test Automation University as well also has some. Then learn coding best practices. Learn how to write clean code. Learn how to write page objects. Learn how to do atomic test. And for atomic test, you can check out Nikolai. He has some really good guides on how you can make your tests small and easy to understand, easy to maintain. Angie Jones also applies the pillars of object-oriented programming to test automation. You can check her out as well. And then identify the testing framework that you want to use. In test automation, there are a lot of different testing frameworks. You have to maybe see which one your company is using, which one is appropriate for the language that you learned, which one you'll get the most benefit from, maybe which one is easier to use at the moment that you can start out with and then build on. But you can find out a lot of different frameworks. So if you're wanting to learn about Cypress, and Cypress is a JavaScript framework, Cypress.io, you can check out Flip. He does a lot of blog posts on Cypress. He also has a course on Test Automation University as well. Test Automation University has a lot of different parts. So if you want to learn about Java, JavaScript, Python, Ruby, APIs, C#, check out Test Automation University. They have all of that information. I also blog about WebDriver.io, and there is Water, which is a Ruby test automation framework. And then you want to understand test automation strategies, what to automate and how to set up a test automation team. After you learned all of that, you want to bring test automation into your company. So a test automation strategy is going to tell you why you're doing test automation, who is going to be writing it, what tools you're going to be using, the timeline that you're going to take to automate, what features are you going to be automating, etc. And then picking out those user scenarios that you want to automate, setting up your team, who is going to be on your team. You're going to have some developers writing unit code. You're still going to have some manual testers, and you're going to have automation engineers. So understanding how to do that is really important. And then for 7, you want to create a portfolio with web and mobile automation. Angie Jones has an article that I'll share the link to where she talks about how you can create a portfolio and the things that should be in that portfolio. So you want to have web automation, API automation, mobile automation. If it is that you're looking for a job in the field, this is going to help set you apart, and people are going to say, okay, you know what you're doing. You have the skills needed for this job. And then understand API testing and how you can add API automation to your portfolio, as I mentioned, is also important. I've talked about SQL and databases. Know how to create queries, know how to use it in your test automation, use it in your testing as well. There have been times when I have had to create queries just to verify what I'm seeing on the front end. And by using sometimes the database as a source of truth, it helps you when you're doing testing to verify if something is a bug or if it isn't. And then understand performance testing and implement it. Performance testing is really important. If it is that your website is moving too slow or your app is too slow, then persons will stop using it. How many persons can the site handle before it goes down, etc. So thinking about all of those things and understanding and implementing them will help you to become an impactful QA engineer. And then accessibility, usability testing. There are persons that use screen readers. There are persons that use closed caption text. There are different persons with different abilities, and understanding those and accounting for those in your development, in your testing is really important. And then doing continuous integration. I've talked about this, how you can set up continuous integration pipelines to run your test automation code, where it can be triggered in the morning or you can manually trigger it, etc. And for accessibility, I would suggest you follow Erin Hess and Crystal Preston. They are 2 persons in the space that are talking about accessibility and how you can test it and the tools that you can use and how you can ensure that you are covering it properly in your application. And then soft skills, learning how to have empathy, learning how to communicate, learning how to listen, and talking with your team members and communicating what you need, how to do all of that is really important. And there is a very in-detailed quality engineer learning roadmap by Blake Norrish that I'm also going to send the link to that you can check out. And it's really helpful in going in depth into a lot of the tools that I mentioned that you can use. Now, you may be still thinking that this is a lot, but this is a Jamaican proverb, and it says, one cocoa, full basket. One cocoa, full basket. You don't have to learn everything at once. You can take your time. You can begin to learn. I took my time. I rolled it all the way back to learning JavaScript. Then I took up a test automation framework and I really understood it. And I learned about Agile. I didn't know about Agile. I learned about exploratory testing. I learned about regression, all of those different terms. I read books and I did certifications. And you can find your own path and use this roadmap that I have suggested to build on the skills that you have and take your time and you'll get there. These are the links I promised. I'll send them in the chat. And I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you have gotten some more information on what you need to become a QA engineer. Let's stay connected. You can find me on Twitter at ilich876. And I blog at juliapottinger.com, and my YouTube is youtube.com/Julia Pottinger. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.